Every day, railways in Britain provide a service for more than 2 million customers. Every year, trains on Britain's railways travel more than 250 million miles. None of this could happen without the skill, professionalism and commitment of thousands of people.
It's a special announcement concerning the electronics options.
This programme looks at your professional standards in one important area, the industry policy on alcohol and drugs. It looks at the role that you have in making sure that alcohol and drugs make no impact on performance and safety. This policy applies to everyone. Wherever you work, your personal conduct has to meet the requirements set out in the policy. This programme will give you the facts you need to make sure that happens. Let's start with a basic question. Why does every responsible organisation need a clear policy on alcohol and drugs? To answer that question, I spoke to Dr. Maurice Lipsedge, a consultant psychiatrist with a special interest in the effect of alcohol and drugs on work performance.
Because it's known that both alcohol and drugs are a major cause of accidents at work. Alcohol and drugs affect the brain in a very significant way. Say the driver of a vehicle who's been drinking or using drugs will react far more slowly to a hazard or to danger and will brake more slowly, increasing the risk of an accident. Judgment of distances is impaired by drugs and alcohol. That's been shown in an experiment with a flight simulator in which airline pilots found it difficult to land accurately on the runway. Decision-making is impaired. It's difficult to concentrate, to marshal all the information available, to coordinate it. One tends to become indecisive, careless and casual. The basic message is that alcohol and drugs not only interfere with efficiency and productivity, but they're also a major cause of accidents.
John Nelson is the Managing Director, Passenger Business South East. I asked him for the reasons behind the policy on alcohol and drugs.
Well, there's an immediate reason, of course, which is that legislation has recently been passed on this very subject, but that isn't the only reason for us reviewing our policy. Of course, we've always had a policy towards alcohol and drugs, and really what we're doing is reviewing it in the light of experience. It's particularly important to us for two reasons. One, because we employ so many people, over 100,000 people, each dependent on the other for their own personal and group safety, so it's important for that reason. It's also obviously very important because being a public transport undertaking, we are responsible day to day for the lives and the safety of millions of people. Therefore, it's important for all of us to understand that we act safely, we behave safely, we think safety all the time. And to drink and to take drugs is not only to abuse your own body and your own system, but it is potentially to put other people's lives at risk.
The reasons for the policy are clear, and the basic requirements it sets out apply to everyone. No employee or contractor shall report or endeavour to report for duty having just consumed alcohol or under the influence of drugs. Shall report for duty in an unfit state due to the use of alcohol or drugs. Be in possession of drugs of abuse in the workplace, or use alcohol or drugs while on duty. The Chief Medical Officer with responsibility for advising the railway industry on occupational health matters is Dr. Jerry Smith. I asked him what practical advice he could give.
Because alcohol is absorbed very quickly, but got rid of from the body at a slow and in some cases unpredictable rate, we've had to set a limit.
So what's the policy trying to do?
What the policy does is enable people to understand how much alcohol they may take, set limits within which they may not take any before booking on, so that they are completely safe and alcohol-free at work.
So how can somebody enjoy a drink with friends and yet still know that they're going to be safe to come into work?
They can do this by knowing the strength of alcohol in individual drinks, and also having an approximate idea of how long it takes alcohol to actually be managed through their body.
Each of these drinks contains 1 unit of alcohol. Take one of these drinks and 1 unit of alcohol goes into your bloodstream. The precise rate that alcohol leaves your bloodstream is different for every individual. Suppose between 9 and 11 o'clock in the evening, I drink 4 units of alcohol. That's equivalent to 2 pints of beer. When I report for duty at 7 in the morning, that alcohol should have left my bloodstream. Please remember, this is only a rough guide. For women, blood alcohol levels tend to be higher than men for the same amount of alcohol consumed. There's no way of speeding up the process of eliminating alcohol from the bloodstream. It just takes time. Lots of people watching this programme work shifts. Is this whole sort of time factor particularly important for them?
Yes, it is important for them. Shift workers can often drink at inappropriate times of day, and also you can have the effects of top-up. In other words, alcohol being added on to what was drunk many hours before, which can then lead to a person being over the limit.
Some drugs obtained on prescription or bought from a pharmacist can affect our ability to work safely or efficiently. If you take medication, it's your responsibility to inform the medical practitioner or pharmacist on every occasion you get the drug about the work that you do and to get their advice. If you have any doubts, inform your supervisor or manager, who should then consult with the Occupational Health Service. Current legislation is clear about which drugs are legal and which are not legal. If a drug isn't tolerated under the law of the land, it's not tolerated at work, and it's as simple as that. Your employer has a duty to ensure that the policy is put into practice. That means telling people what the policy says. And it means screening. A program of screening for drugs and alcohol using proven scientific means is essential to ensure that the policy is working. There are 4 situations when screening will take place. All candidates selected for employment must be screened for the presence of drugs. If drugs are found to be present, the candidate must be rejected. All employees selected for transfer or promotion to a safety-critical post must be screened for the presence of drugs. If drugs are found to be present, the employee will be dismissed. After a safety-critical incident, testing will enable staff to prove that drugs and alcohol played no part in what happened. A program of unannounced screening for drugs is about to be introduced. It'll mean that any abuse problems amongst safety-critical staff can be identified. To begin with, the screening will be based on 5% of safety-critical posts. If you're not sure if your job is safety-critical, then ask your manager or supervisor. The railway employers say the process of choosing who will be tested will be genuinely random. Drawing up the lists will be done using the computer database in personnel. It won't be done by managers picking names to be put forward. I asked Dr. Smith how these tests will work in practice.
The member of staff is given 48 hours notice in which to turn up at one of our occupational health centres, where he or she will then be asked to provide a sample of urine.
How can you be sure that the results of these tests are accurate?
We have absolutely 100% confidence in the accuracy of these tests. There is a preliminary screening test, and then if that shows positive, a very sophisticated independent test is then done, which proves beyond any doubt the nature of the substance present in that sample.
There's one word to describe the context in which any breaking of the rules is viewed, and that word is safety. If screening reveals the presence of drugs of abuse, the penalty is dismissal. If testing reveals a blood alcohol level in excess of the statutory limit of 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres, the penalty is dismissal. If testing reveals a blood alcohol level of between 30 and 79 milligrams per 100 millilitres, the penalty is likely to be dismissal. These penalties reflect the seriousness with which drug and alcohol abuse is viewed. I asked leading members of the rail unions how they felt about the alcohol and drugs policy. How far are the unions behind it?
Well, totally behind it, completely behind it, because You know, in a highly safety-conscious industry like the railways, I mean, drugs and alcohol have really got no place. And that's a clear view that we've got, so we support it totally.
All of the unions, to my knowledge, are behind the drugs and alcohol policy that's been adopted by the railway industry. We believe that it's right. We believe that we should protect the general public best we can, and certainly keep reminding our members of the risks of drug and alcohol.
The industry insists the tests they have for drugs will be genuinely random, and that the information they get about alcohol and drug taking will be kept confidential. How confident are you that they'll keep these promises?
Well, we're very confident about the assurances we've been given. We know, for example, that great care will be taken, that you know, samples won't get mixed up and the tests will be carried out with dignity. And we'll continue to monitor that situation. So we're very confident about that. We're sure on past practice too that personal matters will be kept very confidential.
If you had a single piece of advice to give your members about alcohol and drug taking, what would it be?
The single piece of advice I'd give to all my members is don't put your life at risk. Don't put the general public's life at risk, and don't put your job at risk. Could you imagine that if, for instance, you were dismissed for taking drugs or alcohol on the job, what future would you have outside of the railway industry? So safety is the main criteria, and my advice is don't put yourself at risk at any time.
The piece of advice I would give would be, if you've got a problem in that area, go and talk to somebody about it. You know, don't hide it. Go to your supervisor or your local manager and talk about it.
I asked Anna McHugh what kind of support is available to people who come forward voluntarily.
We provide a full rehabilitation programme for anybody seeking to get well. It's really as simple as that. If anybody needs a help, needs any kind of guidance, who needs rehabilitation, who maybe needs just some counselling, it's here if they want it. The bottom line is they've got to want it.
There's no need to put yourself at risk. The rail employers and the trade unions are committed to a policy of offering support and rehabilitation. If you've got a drugs or alcohol problem and you ask for help, help will be given. But don't leave it until it's too late. It's no good coming forward after a safety critical incident, or after screening has turned up a positive result, or even after you've been selected for screening. The safety of your colleagues and your customers has to be the first priority. This video is only part of the process of giving you the facts about the policy and code of practice on drugs and alcohol. You'll be able to get more information from the briefing sessions, from your own managers, and from the Occupational Health Service. I hope this programme has shown how the action being taken will help maintain the highest professional standards of safety and performance. It's a policy that will benefit you and your colleagues, and the millions of customers like me who depend on the railways. Goodbye.